Welcome back to Everlasting Summer. Leaving off. Continuing on from where we left off on the nice little cliffhanger. The save actually worked. Woo! It didn't corrupt this time, so I don't know. Maybe there was an update or something. I need to realize. I didn't remind myself what was going on though, as I don't remember what was going on. I think I was going to the canteen or something like that. All right. I set my eyes across the landscape, and then... oh god. I saw Elisa, hanging high above the ground from a tree right in front of the cabin. Come on. A sharp pain pierced my temples, and I collapsed to the ground. The horror was so overwhelming that I literally felt my whole body being bound in steel chains. Blinded with fear, I barely managed to crawl back into the cabin and close the door. What happened? Masha rushed over to me. Don't look. I grasped her arm. Don't go outside. What's the matter? She reached for the door handle. I attempted to stop her, but I was so weak that I could only let out a groan of despair. Opening the door, Masha screamed and froze in her tracks. Gathering my last ounces of strength, I got up and kicked the door shut. The next moment, Masha fainted and fell back into my arms. I carried her to the bed and put her down next to the shaking Rotor. If your Rotor is shaking, get it checked. His face told me that he's definitely not interested in knowing what happened there. All these screams woke Lena up. She rose slightly in her bed and gave us a glance. What's happening? She asked in a whisper. She's fucking whispering everything! I didn't know how I should reply. Well, I guess we can take out Lena as a suspect, because that happened. I felt a scream rising up in my throat, but I managed to muffle it to a hollow sigh. Something like that? What the fuck? Lena was horrified, but she still didn't realize what exactly had happened here. Don't go outside, I moaned. Unlike Masha, she wasn't one to argue. An oppressive silence ensued. I said that right the first time. Even the grasshoppers seemed to quiet down in order to add suspense to the situation. Masha was still lying on my lap, Router was quivering in the corner of the bed, and Lena was sitting in front of me with an expression of doom and despair on her face. Oh yeah, right, Elisa was with us, and then she left to go to the canteen, didn't she? Yeah, we're not going to the canteen. I stared at the door with an unblinking gaze, waiting for the moment it will burst open, and... oh, I think I was looking for Elisa is what my job was. I guess I completed the job. I don't remember, honestly. My fear couldn't manifest in any concrete form. A homicidal maniac, a monster, an alien... it was the horror of the unknowable, darkness, and emptiness. I wasn't afraid that I will be torn to pieces just like Slavia, or become a zombie like Ulyanas. I was afraid to disappear, vanish without a trace from this world. Masha let out a quiet moan. I just had such a nightmare. It wasn't a dream. She opened her eyes wide and looked at me with horror. Then, there... Don't look. I shouted and hastily embraced her. Lena started crying loudly, ran up and pressed herself against me, trembling all over. Long minutes dragged on in an agonizing silence. So, what are we going to do now? Asked Masha through her tears. She didn't seem so self-confident now, although we were in the same situation. Time passed, yet nothing happened. We had to make a decision. I couldn't say that I came back to my senses after what I saw, but I still felt my mind clearing up a bit. I knew one thing for certain: we can't stay here. And it wasn't because it was more dangerous here than anywhere else. It's just because I can't endure staying near the corpse of Elisa. Bet it's even more of a gut-wrenching experience for the girls. We have to go, I said quietly. I felt Masha and Lena hugging me even tighter. We have to... Router stopped shaking and left the bed. How are you feeling? Oh, I thought I was asking Router that. Fuck Router. We don't care about him. I asked Lena. She said nothing. Can you walk? Probably. I gently escaped their embraces and got up. We have to run. At night it will be easier to go. Why at night? But we... Masha tried to make a humble objection. Yeah, I know that we decided to stay, but now we have to get out of here. I turned to Router. You do realize that they shouldn't see all that? He gave a barely visible nod. Although Router did not know what happened to Elisa, it was obvious that his vivid imagination had conjured up so many gruesome theories during this time that he was probably even more depressed than me. Okay, we're gonna hold hands and go. I'll go first and lead the way. Masha goes next, then Lena, then you. I get a feeling it's just gonna be me and the two girls by the time we get out. I'm really curious to see how this ends. I hope it doesn't end soon though, because I need to pre-record for I'm going to Florida soon, so for like a week. So I need to pre-record stuff. I looked at the girls. They were sitting with their heads hanging down, sobbing quietly. Ready? Nobody replied. This is obviously a useless question. One can never be ready for such a situation. I took Masha's hand, turned around, and gave Lena and Router a serious look. Okay, now, shut your eyes, and don't open them no matter what. You got that? Yeah, Lena nodded. What? So why did his get cut off? I guess I wasn't technically cut off, it was just, yeah. I steeled myself, burst open the door, and went out, holding Masha's hand. Watch out for the steps. This music. This is very creepy music. When we made our way outside, I darted a final glance at Elisa. What I saw now didn't send me spiraling to the ground, although my heart was racing frantically. I was feeling sick and dizzy, and my stomach turned. She's hanging about 5 meters above the ground. Several neckerchiefs tied together in a string were tightened around her throat. Bulging eyes, protruding tongue, what? Putrefactions. Already, I don't even know what that, I've never heard of that word before. Already at work on the body. It looks like she didn't die a couple hours ago, but at least a couple days ago. An expression of agony and inhuman suffering was permanently frozen on her face. It was clear that she couldn't have done such a thing to herself. My God, who came up with all this? Maybe we're in hell. I hastened my steps away from the diabolical scene, dragging the others along. I ordered them to open their eyes only when we reached the square. She's still there? Asked Masha, not letting go of my hand. I just nodded. Who? Elisa? Lena cried out loud and burst into tears. Masha embraced her and tried to comfort her. What happened to her? Muttered Router with a faltering tongue. I bet you don't want to know that. For a while, I just stood there and looked at the moon. Lena was sobbing, Router was pacing in circles around us, and Masha sat down on the bench and buried her face in her hands. Okay, it's time, I said quietly, yet nobody moved. We can't stay here. I walked to Masha, leaned over, and took her hand. She raised her eyes, filled with tears, at me, and nodded. We slowly proceeded to the bus stop. Night has fallen on the camp. Along the way, I noticed that the grasshoppers were almost quiet. Keeping silent for some time, now they resumed their nasty song, but this time it was much quieter and, I might say, a little bit more respectful. Their daytime progressive noise changed to a nocturne for violin and orchestra. Is there any chance they're conscious about what's going on here? Of course, if we assume that they are grasshoppers in hell, too. We came to the bus stop and stopped. Stopped at the bus stop. Woo! Hesitating. So, where are we going? asked Masha, wiping her tears. Okay, we already tried going to the right. Let's go to the left. But there's no town there. And just a couple of days ago, there was no camp to the right. Maybe we shouldn't, Lena sobbed quietly. We have no choice. I won't stay here any longer. We were just about to get moving when we heard noises approaching us from far away. I strained my eyes and caught a glimpse of someone coming here down the road. A bus. That steps is not a bus, exclaimed Ryder with joy in his face. In his face? In his voice. You can have joy on your face. Shut up, you fool. It's not a bus. People are approaching. I hissed at him. Lots of people, said Masha anxiously. It was utterly clear that we shouldn't stay here any longer. I turned around and saw someone approaching us down the road from the other direction, too. That is loud! The noise was getting louder. The chirping of grasshoppers, although not their usual one, a much louder, distorted version, as if it had been passed through a guitar amplifier. It sounds worse than a guitar amplifier. Run! I shouted, but nobody moved. Oh, screw it. I grabbed Masha and Lena's hands and darted off back into the camp. Wait, what about Router? The girls were floundering in a stupor, so I ended up literally dragging them along. Having dashed to the square, I stopped to catch some breath, and only then did I realize that Router had been left behind. We have to go back to get him! Masha screamed and shifted towards the bus stop. Screamed? Jesus Christ. Are you nuts? I pulled her hand and forced her to stop. You want us all to meet the same fate? Lena was trembling so wildly that I felt my right hand shaking as it held hers. Keep running. Where to? Dunno. Dunno. Into the woods. Returning to Olga's cabin wasn't an option. My self-preservation instinct also suggested that we shouldn't stay in the open area as well. We dashed towards the woods. I held the girls' hands tightly. They ran with difficulty, especially Lena, who was swaying and weaving. She fell a few times, but I quickly picked her up, spurring her on with shouts, and dragged her on. Passing through the trees was the hardest part. Though the full moon was shining up in the sky, in the dark I was still constantly running into snags, branches, falling into pits. Nettles were slashing my leg. Nettles were slashing my legs, and leaves were biting me and were hitting. Oh my god! I can't speak today, apparently. Were hitting me in the face, leaving painful scratches. My heart was pounding heavily. Every breath I took whistled painfully in my lungs. The blood was pounding so heavily in my head that it seemed like my skull was ready to burst from the pressure any moment. I stopped feeling my body. My legs carried me forward by themselves. At last we ran into a clearing and stopped. Exhausted, the girls fell to the ground, and I sat on a fallen tree. Who were they? People? Or demons? Or something else? And where was that chirping sound coming from? I couldn't make them out in the twilight, but that was probably for the best. After I slightly recovered my senses, I walked up to the girls. Nina was lying dead white on the ground. Seems like she'd completely lost it. Masha was sitting, hugging her knees and rocking from side to side. We've got to do something, I said as I sat near her. It's too late. We're gonna die, she whispered in a hollow voice. We're still alive. That means there's still hope. No, there's nothing now. It's all over. I put my arms around her and held her tight. No, it's not. I sat, staring into the darkness of the forest. The grasshoppers could barely be heard now. If not for Masha's labored breathing, I would think I was dead. Forgive me, she whispered quietly. For what? For everything. For being like that. For whatever we failed to achieve. It's not the right time for that now, I said tenderly. We don't have much time left, so I'd say it's the right time. She looked up at me and faintly smiled. Forgive me. If only I hadn't been so selfish in the first place. I looked into her eyes, her bottomless, sorrowful eyes, and I felt a hot tear crossing my cheek. Oh, no, it's me who should be sorry. I was totally ignorant of what to say in such a situation. I did so much wrong to her, caused her so much pain, and now, at the last minute, I can't think of anything other than an empty, I'm sorry. I was overwhelmed with anger at my helplessness, at being unable to protect the only person I held dear. Fuck Lena. Screw her. No one cares about her. You know, I always loved you. I know, she said quietly. Masha smiled again, although her face was trembling and tears were running down her cheeks. And I still love you. I know. I couldn't stand it. I longed to turn away, to close my eyes. But I can't afford weakness at this last minute. I leaned down and kissed her hard. Time stood still for us. This cursed pioneer camp, the dark night, all those hellspawn, and even the bloody grasshoppers just ceased to exist. What about Lena? The whole universe ceased to exist. Just the two of us were left. Just when I was almost willing to believe that it was all just a bad dream, the woods came alive with rustling. The foliage far away quivered and a swarm of vague silhouettes emerged from the darkness. I still couldn't make them out, but I was certain that they are the same creatures that we'd seen at the bus stop. My whole body was stricken with dismay. I was afraid to breathe. So, this is how it ends, said Masha quietly and held me tighter. No, this is not the end. Suddenly I realized that I'll fight for her to the last drop of my blood. As long as there is a slightest chance of survival. I jumped up, tugged her off the ground, and rushed over to Lena. So Lena is still here! She was lying, deathly pale, with her eyes open, and she didn't seem to understand what was happening at all. I started shaking her by her shoulders. Get up. There was no reaction. I gave her a few slaps, and she let out a dull moan. Get up now. As I roused Lena, she stared at me with a spaced-out look. Let's run. I grabbed the girls by their hands and rushed aimlessly. The further from them, the better. I was tumbling down, getting up again, helping Lena and Masha to get up too. Hewing through the dense foliage. Eventually, the noise faded, leaving us with only the quiet chirping of grasshoppers. The light flickered in the distance. What light? You mean a light? Soon enough we came out into a small clearing, completely sheltered by the trees. There was a building that somehow looked like a kindergarten. What is that? I stammered. The building of the old camp, said Lena faintly. It seems that she was slowly coming back to her senses. I stopped, hesitating. Sure, it was quite naive to think that we could find shelter here. The bomb shelter! It was obvious that we can't be secure anywhere with all the stuff that's happening. On the other hand, we were on the verge of collapsing. Especially the girls. I took a few hesitant steps towards the building when the rustling from behind reached my ears. I froze in my tracks, unable to turn around. Oh, this again. The rustling was growing louder, and suddenly we heard the diabolical chirping. Whoa! Hi, Lena, heard Lena, Ulyana. I forced myself, with a superhuman effort, and turned around. A crowd was behind me. A crowd of little girls. Rather, a crowd of Ulyanas. Oh, I was right. They were all exactly the same as that Ulyana I saw this morning, with the same torn face and horribly distorted smile. And all of them made the same hellish sound, the chirping of grasshoppers, a diabolical noise that chilled my heart. They're the ones making this sound? We froze where we stood, unable to take even a single step away. All of a sudden, one of the Ulyanas came forward to the crowd and pulled the severed head of Roder from behind her back. A grimace of horror was permanently frozen on his face. I almost fainted as she started to talk. Hi there, Semyon. How are you doing? Her voice felt like a bullet piercing right through my brain. I screamed and fled towards the old camp building, dragging the girls along. I just imagine she's saying it in the same old Ulyana voice. I must admit that back then I'd completely stopped thinking of Masha or Lena. Maybe they were also screaming. Maybe they were shackled by horror. I don't know. The most important thing now is to get as far away as possible from these monsters. We flew into the building, and immediately the ground disappeared under our feet, and I fell into the darkness. What? I awoke in complete darkness. My whole body ached, especially my legs. But somehow I still managed to get up, leaning against the wall. The sound of the Ulyanas was nowhere to be heard, which calmed me down a little. I called out in a thin voice, "Masha? Lena?" I heard a movement nearby and felt someone gripping my leg. I instinctively jumped back, but at the same moment a faint voice came from below. "Are we still alive?" "Seems like it." I helped Masha get up. Suddenly a bright light fired up a couple of meters away from me. I leaned against the wall, trembling, but immediately realized that it was Lena, who had turned on a flashlight. Where did that come from? "Where did you get that?" Lena came closer, limping. "I took it, just in case, yesterday." I took the flashlight from her and shone it around. We were in some kind of tunnel. The walls were lined with wires. Unlit lamps were hanging from the ceiling. Where are we? I don't know. Looks like some kind of bomb shelter. I looked up and saw a pretty formidable hole. Jesus Christ. Beyond which one could barely make out the hallway of the old camp building. The floor had probably rotted with age, and we fell down here. At first glance, there was no way to climb back. Too high, and there's nothing to grab. Also, Ulyanas up there. "So what is there? Go further?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "I don't know, but we'll have to check." I shone the flashlight ahead of us and took a few uncertain steps. My whole body was covered in bruises and scratches, but I could still walk. "Ouch," Lena cried out behind me. "What is it?" "I think I sprained my ankle." That's not her voice. I was honestly expecting the next line to be something cliched, like, "Leave me behind, I'll only be a burden." But of course, she would never say that. "Okay, lean on me." I went over to Lena and offered her my shoulder. Soon enough, the stone walls gave way to wooden ones, we ended up in some sort of mine. "Let's have a break," Masha begged. I carefully lowered Lena to the ground and sat down nearby. Lowered her to the ground? Well, yeah, I guess helped her sit down. Well, at least those monsters are nowhere to be seen. But for how long? I sighed heavily and closed my eyes. "What do you think is going on here?" Masha's voice was trembling, but she still sounded more or less confident. She looks like she's so exhausted and devastated that there's just no strength left for fear. I don't know, and honestly, I don't want to know. But we're gonna get out. Definitely. I couldn't see her face, but I was sure that she's smiling. Suddenly, the flashlight blinked and went out. I hit it with my palm several times. The mine's walls lit up with a dim light once again, and I immediately realized that something was wrong. Lena was nowhere to be found. Oh, fuck's sakes. "Lena's disappeared," I whispered. "What?" Masha grabbed me by the sleeve and stared at the spot where Lena had been sitting a moment ago. "How? But how?" She started to cry quietly. "We'll die. We'll definitely die." I also very much wanted to burst into tears. Darkness surrounded us all around. That's what sound means. Closing in. The flashlight was gradually dying, and with it, our chances of survival. "Get up. Time to go. The battery will die soon." A couple of minutes later, we came to a fork. "The hell, is this some kind of labyrinth too?" I hissed under my breath. Let's go back, maybe? No, no way. Masha pressed against me even harder. Where to then? I don't know. But we had to choose anyway, and I decided to go right. Soon we came to another fork. Where to now? Let's stick to the direction we chose before. We had been wandering for too long. We had neither strength nor will left to move on. I was so terribly thirsty, I was ready to lick the moisture from off the walls. Let's sit. Just a little. A bit. We can't. We must keep going. But just a minute. Masha begged in anguish. Fine. She lowered her head onto my shoulder. The flashlight was blinking more and more often, so I decided to turn it off for now, to save the battery. This is it. I don't know how much time passed. I desperately wanted to sleep. My eyes were closing by themselves. How did we first meet? That was so long. That was so long ago. Do you remember? I asked in a whisper. What? Masha's voice was trembling. How we met? Yes. She tried to laugh, but immediately began to cough. I'm gonna sleep for a while, okay? Just for a while, or you'll sleep through the whole day again. Well, but will you wake me up? But you will wake me up. Of course. I kissed her and closed my eyes. Oblivion was getting closer, but I didn't care. I was transported back in time to that very day. I feel like the end's coming soon, so I'm gonna end this a little early, just so I don't know. I'm thinking I might have like a 4-minute episode or something if I don't. At least this way I'll have an 8-minute episode. Woo! So, yeah, thank you all for watching. I'm excited for this. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.